What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends walks onto a morning talk show and gets blindsided by a host who thinks the cameras make her untouchable? In just 37 seconds, one question turned a routine interview into the most shocking walkout in morning television history. Harrison Ford sat down on the famous orange couch, expecting to talk about his latest project. The actor, known for playing some of cinema's most iconic heroes, had no idea he was about to become the hero of a very different kind of story. One where he would stand up against something far more dangerous than any villain he ever faced on screen. A talk show host who forgot that respect matters more than ratings. The morning started like any other. The studio lights were bright. The audience was buzzing with excitement, and the Today Show panel was ready to go. Savannah Guthrie sat in the center, flanked by Hoda Kotb and Craig Melvin. They welcomed Harrison with the usual smiles and pleasantries, but beneath that polished surface, something was brewing. "Harrison, welcome back," Savannah said, leaning forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Always a pleasure to have you here." "Thanks for having me," Harrison replied, settling into his seat with the casual confidence of someone who had done 1,000 interviews before. The first few minutes went smoothly. They talked about his new film, some light banter about his experience on set, the kind of safe territory that morning shows usually stick to. Hoda chimed in with a question about working with the director, and Harrison answered with genuine enthusiasm. Craig added a comment about the trailer, and the conversation flowed naturally. But then Savannah shifted in her seat. Her producer had clearly given her a signal, because her entire demeanor changed. The warm television host disappeared, replaced by something harder, more aggressive. "So Harrison, I have to ask," Savannah said, and there was an edge to her voice now. "You've been doing this for decades. Some might say you're past your prime. How do you feel about still trying to compete with younger actors?" The studio went quiet. Hoda's smile froze on her face. Craig shifted uncomfortably. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed to sense that something had just gone very wrong. Harrison's expression didn't change, but anyone who knew him could see the spark of irritation in his eyes. "I'm not trying to compete with anyone," he said carefully. "I'm just doing the work I love." "But come on," Savannah pressed, and now she was leaning forward like a prosecutor going in for the kill. "You're 70 plus years old doing action scenes. Isn't that a little desperate? I mean, at what point do you just accept that maybe it's time to step aside and let the younger generation have their moment?" Hoda actually gasped. She tried to jump in, her voice higher than usual. "Savannah, I don't think that's—" "No, let's talk about this," Savannah interrupted, holding up a hand to silence her co-host. "I think America wants to know. Harrison, are you holding on to these roles because you need the money? Because that's what a lot of people are saying." "Who's saying that?" Harrison asked, his voice still calm, but with an undercurrent of steel. "Sources," Savannah said vaguely, waving her hand dismissively. "Industry insiders. People are talking, Harrison. They're saying you're blocking opportunities for younger talent, that you're being selfish." "Selfish for working?" Harrison asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's an interesting take." "Selfish for not knowing when to quit," Savannah clarified, and there was an almost gleeful quality to her voice now, as if she thought she was really onto something. "You've had an incredible career. Nobody's disputing that. But isn't there something to be said for going out on top? For letting someone else have a chance?" "Who says I'm not on top?" Harrison responded evenly. "The box office," Savannah said with a slight smirk. "The reviews. The fact that studios keep having to justify why they're still casting you instead of someone younger, someone more relevant." Craig tried to intervene. "Listen, I think what we're really interested in is—" "I'm not finished," Savannah snapped at him, without even looking in his direction. Her eyes stayed locked on Harrison. "You know what I find interesting? You've built this whole persona as this gruff, no-nonsense guy. But maybe that's just covering up the fact that you're afraid. Afraid of becoming irrelevant. afraid that people will forget about you if you stop. The audience was dead silent. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was an attack, broadcast live to millions of viewers. Harrison sat very still. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it cut through the studio like a blade. "Are you done? I'm just asking questions that people want." "Answered," Savannah said. But there was something triumphant in her expression. She thought she had him cornered. She thought she'd gotten the dramatic moment her producers wanted. "No," Harrison said. "You're not asking questions. You're making statements disguised as questions. There's a difference." "Oh, come on." "Let me finish," Harrison said, and the authority in his voice made Savannah actually stop talking. "You asked if I'm desperate. You asked if I need money. You suggested I'm blocking younger actors. Those aren't questions. Those are accusations, and they're disrespectful." "I'm just doing my job," Savannah said, but her voice was defensive now. "Your job is to interview people," Harrison replied, "not to ambush them, not to insult them, not to make up narratives about their motivations." Hoda was nodding slightly. Craig looked like he wanted to applaud, but knew he couldn't. "I think you're being oversensitive," Savannah said, and she actually rolled her eyes. "This is what journalists do. We ask the hard questions." "Hard questions are fine," Harrison said, "but what you're doing isn't journalism. It's cruelty dressed up as curiosity." "That's ridiculous," Savannah shot back. "You're a public figure. You chose this life. That means you're open to criticism." "Criticism is fine," Harrison said, "but you're not criticizing my work. You're attacking me personally. You're making assumptions about my character, my motivations, my financial situation, and you're doing it without any evidence, just vague references to unnamed sources." "Are you saying I'm lying?" Savannah asked, her voice rising. "I'm saying you're being reckless," Harrison replied, "and unprofessional." The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Hoda looked like she wanted to disappear. Craig was staring at his notes, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. The producers were probably having a meltdown in the control room. But Savannah wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by the conflict. "You know what I think," she said, leaning back in her chair with a smirk. "I think you can't handle being challenged. You're used to everyone treating you like royalty because you were in a couple of big movies 40 years ago. But times have changed, Harrison. Nobody cares about Han Solo anymore." That was the moment everything changed. Harrison didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He simply stood up. "What are you doing?" Savannah asked, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in her voice. "I'm leaving," Harrison said simply. He started removing his microphone. "You can't just leave in the middle of an interview," Savannah said, but she was losing control of the situation, and everyone could see it. "Watch me," Harrison replied. "This is completely unprofessional," Savannah said, her voice getting louder. "You agreed to come on this show." "I agreed to an interview," Harrison interrupted, still calm, still in control. "Not a hit job. There's a difference." Hoda finally found her voice. "Harrison, please," she said gently. "Maybe we can just—" "Hoda, you seem like a nice person," Harrison said, and his voice was kind when he addressed her. "But your colleague here has made it very clear what kind of show this is going to be, and I'm not interested in participating." "Oh, please," Savannah said, throwing up her hands. "You're really going to play the victim here? You, one of the most powerful men in Hollywood?" "I'm not playing anything," Harrison said. "I'm simply choosing not to sit here and be insulted on national television." "Nobody's insulting you," Savannah said, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. "You called me desperate," Harrison said, ticking off points on his fingers. "You suggested I'm blocking younger actors. You said I need money. You claim nobody cares about my work anymore. If those aren't insults, I'd hate to see what you consider insulting." Craig spoke up, his voice careful. "Harrison, I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. If we could just—" Craig, I appreciate you trying to help, Harrison said, but there's no wrong foot to blame here. Your co-host made a choice. She decided that attacking me would make for good television. Maybe she's right. Maybe the ratings will be great. But I don't have to be part of it. So you're just going to run away? Savannah challenged. Is that what Han Solo would do? Harrison actually smiled at that, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Han Solo is a fictional character, he said. I'm a real person, and real people don't have to tolerate being treated poorly just because someone has a camera pointed at them. You signed up for this, Savannah insisted. This is part of being famous. No, Harrison said firmly. Being interviewed is part of being famous. Being attacked isn't. There's a line, and you crossed it. I think you're being dramatic, Savannah said, but her voice was less certain now. The audience was clearly on Harrison's side. Even her own co-hosts looked uncomfortable with how she was handling this. Maybe I am, Harrison said, but I'd rather be dramatic than disrespectful. He finished removing his microphone and handed it to a nearby crew member. Thank you, he said to the crew member, because even in the middle of this confrontation, he had the grace to be polite to the people just doing their jobs. If you walk out that door, you're never coming back on this show, Savannah said. And now there was desperation in her voice. She was realizing that this wasn't going the way she'd planned. She was supposed to be in control. She was supposed to make him squirm. Instead, he was walking away with his dignity intact, while she looked like a bully. That's fine with me, Harrison said simply. You're making a huge mistake, Savannah said. I don't think so, Harrison replied. The mistake would be staying here and letting you continue to disrespect me. Hoda tried one more time. Harrison, I'm really sorry about all this. If there's anything... Hoda, you have nothing to apologize for, Harrison said warmly. You've been nothing but professional and kind. I hope you remember that you deserve to work with people who treat others the same way. The implication was clear, and Savannah's face flushed red. Are you seriously trying to create drama between me and my co-hosts now? She demanded. I'm not creating anything, Harrison said. I'm just stating facts. Hoda has been respectful. Craig has been respectful. You haven't. That's not drama. That's just reality. Get out then, Savannah said, her professional mask finally cracking completely. If you're so offended by actual journalism, then leave. See if I care. I don't need your permission, Harrison said. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. That's something you might want to think about. Just because you have a platform doesn't mean you have the right to abuse it. I'm not abusing anything, Savannah protested, but her voice was shrill now. I'm doing my job. If this is your job, Harrison said, then you need a new job. He turned to walk away, but Savannah wasn't done. She couldn't let him have the last word. You're going to regret this, she called after him. Do you know how many people would kill to be on this show? Harrison stopped and turned back. Then invite one of them, he said. Someone who doesn't mind being treated like garbage. Because I'm not that person. You think you're better than everyone else, Savannah said, and now she was standing too, her voice echoing through the studio. You walk around with this attitude, like the world owes you something. I don't think the world owes me anything, Harrison said, but I do think I deserve basic respect. We all do, even you. That last comment seemed to take the wind out of Savannah's sails. She stood there, mouth open, trying to think of a comeback. Craig seized the opportunity. We're going to take a commercial break, he said, looking directly at the camera. No, we're not, Savannah snapped. I'm not finished. Yes, you are, Harrison said quietly. Goodbye, Savannah. I hope you figure out the difference between being tough and being mean. Because right now, you're just being mean. And with that, he walked off the set. The cameras caught every step. The audience sat in stunned silence. Hoda had tears in her eyes. Craig looked like he was trying very hard to remain neutral. And Savannah stood there, alone in the middle of the set, realizing that she'd just lost control of everything. "Well," she said, trying to recover, trying to laugh it off. "I guess some people can't handle the heat." But nobody was buying it. The audience wasn't applauding. Her co-hosts weren't backing her up. Even the crew looked uncomfortable. Hoda spoke softly, but her words carried weight. "Savannah, that was really harsh." "Oh, not you too," Savannah said, whirling on her. "Since when did everyone become so sensitive?" "It's not about being sensitive," Craig said, and there was an edge to his voice now. "It's about being decent. That man came here to talk about his film, and you attacked him personally." "I was asking questions," Savannah insisted, but she was losing ground fast. "No," Hoda said, shaking her head. "You were trying to humiliate him, and it backfired." "I can't believe you're taking his side," Savannah said, looking between her co-hosts in disbelief. "There are no sides," Craig said. "There's just right and wrong, and what you did was wrong." The cameras were still rolling. This whole meltdown was being broadcast live, and Savannah was finally starting to realize what she'd done. "We need to go to commercial," she said quietly. "Yeah," Craig agreed. "We really do." As the show cut away, the studio erupted in chaos. Producers were running around. The audience was buzzing with conversation. And somewhere down the hallway, Harrison Ford was probably getting into a car, completely unbothered by the storm he'd left behind. Because here's the thing about standing up for yourself. It's not about being dramatic. It's not about making a scene. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Harrison Ford had spent decades in Hollywood. He'd been through countless interviews, faced down all kinds of questions, dealt with every type of journalist imaginable. He knew the difference between a tough interview and a personal attack. And when Savannah Guthrie crossed that line, he didn't argue. He didn't fight. He didn't try to win. He simply removed himself from the situation with grace and dignity. That's real strength. Not the ability to endure abuse, but the wisdom to know when to walk away. Back in the studio, Savannah tried to regroup during the commercial break. "This is going to be fine," she said to herself, pacing back and forth. "We'll spin this. We'll make him look like the bad guy." But Hoda wasn't having it. "Savannah, you need to apologize," she said firmly. "For what?" Savannah demanded. "Doing my job." "For being cruel," Hoda said simply. "That wasn't journalism. That was bullying." "You don't know what you're talking about," Savannah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Hoda replied. "I've been doing this job for years. I've interviewed difficult people. I've asked hard questions. But I've never, ever attacked someone the way you just did." Craig nodded in agreement. "She's right, Savannah. You went way too far." "Oh, so now you're both against me?" Savannah asked, her voice rising again. "We're not against you," Craig said patiently. "We're trying to help you see what everyone else already sees. You crossed a line." "What line?" Savannah shot back. "The line where we're not allowed to ask real questions anymore? The line where celebrities get to control the narrative?" "That's not what happened here," Hoda said, her voice still gentle but firm. "You didn't ask real questions. You made accusations. You insulted him. You questioned his motives, his career, his entire existence in this industry." "He's a public figure," Savannah repeated, clinging to that justification like a life raft. "Public figures don't get to complain about scrutiny." "Scrutiny is one thing," Craig interjected. "What you did was something else entirely. You basically called him desperate and washed up to his face. How did you think that was going to go?" "I thought he'd defend himself," Savannah said. "I thought we'd have a real conversation instead of the usual promotional garbage." "So, you ambushed him," Hoda said flatly. "You decided to make him defend his entire career and his choices on live television without any warning." "That's what makes good television," Savannah insisted, but even she sounded less certain now. "No, Craig said, shaking his head. Good television is when people feel comfortable enough to open up. What you did was create an environment where the only rational choice was to leave, and that's exactly what he did. A production assistant hurried over, looking stressed. We're back in 30 seconds, she said. Great, Savannah muttered. Just great. You still have time to make this right, Hoda said softly. When we come back, you could acknowledge that things got heated. You could show some humility. I'm not apologizing on air, Savannah said flatly. That would make me look weak. You know what makes you look weak? Craig asked. Refusing to admit when you're wrong. That's not strength. That's stubbornness. I wasn't wrong, Savannah said, but her voice wavered. Then why did he leave? Hoda asked gently. Harrison Ford has done thousands of interviews. He's dealt with tough questions before. If you weren't wrong, why did this one end with him walking off? Savannah had no answer for that. She just stood there, arms crossed, jaw set, refusing to back down even as everything inside her was starting to crack. 10 seconds, the production assistant called out. Craig and Hoda returned to their seats. Savannah took a deep breath and did the same. The cameras came back on, and the show went on even though everyone knew something fundamental had broken. He's an actor, Savannah said, throwing up her hands. He'll be fine. His ego might be bruised, but he'll survive. This isn't about him anymore, Hoda said quietly. This is about you, about who you are as a person and as a journalist. And right now, I don't like what I'm seeing. Those words hung in the air. Savannah stared at her co-host, finally seeing the disappointment in Hoda's eyes. And maybe, just maybe, she started to understand what she'd done. But understanding and admitting fault are two different things. And as the show came back from commercial, Savannah painted on a smile and addressed the camera like nothing had happened. Well, that was unexpected, she said with a forced laugh. Harrison Ford, everyone, always unpredictable. But the audience wasn't laughing. They'd seen what happened. They'd heard every word, and they knew who the real villain of this story was. The rest of the show limped along awkwardly. Hoda and Craig tried their best to maintain some sense of normalcy, but the energy was completely off. Every smile seemed forced. Every laugh seemed hollow. The ghost of Harrison Ford's dignified exit hung over everything. When the show finally ended, Savannah disappeared into her dressing room. Hoda and Craig exchanged looks, but said nothing. What was there to say? They'd witnessed their co-host have a complete professional meltdown on live television. They'd seen her attack a respected actor for no good reason. They'd watched as he calmly dismantled her arguments and walked away with his head held high. And in that moment, everyone learned an important lesson. Power doesn't come from having a platform. It doesn't come from being on television or having millions of viewers. Real power comes from self-respect, from knowing your worth, from understanding that you don't have to tolerate mistreatment just because someone else thinks they're entitled to dish it out. Harrison Ford proved that day that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply walk away. Not with anger, not with threats, not with drama, just with quiet dignity and absolute certainty that you deserve better. Savannah Guthrie learned that having the biggest microphone doesn't make you right. It just makes you louder. And being loud isn't the same as being powerful. Being mean isn't the same as being tough. And attacking someone doesn't make you a journalist. It just makes you a bully with a camera. The contrast couldn't have been more clear. On one side, a man who had nothing to prove but everything to protect. His dignity, his self-respect, his boundaries. On the other side, a host who thought her position gave her the right to say whatever she wanted. Consequences be damned. But consequences always come. They might not come immediately, but they come. And on that morning, they came in the form of a 70-plus-year-old actor who simply refused to play along, who looked at the game being played and said, "No, thank you, I'm not interested." That's the power of choice. That's the power of self-awareness. That's the power of knowing that no interview, no show, no moment of television is worth sacrificing your dignity for. As Harrison Ford left that building, he left behind more than just an awkward television moment. He left behind a masterclass in self-respect. He showed everyone watching that it's okay to set boundaries, that it's okay to call out bad behavior, that it's okay to leave when you're not being treated well. And maybe most importantly, he showed that grace under pressure doesn't mean accepting abuse. It means having the strength to walk away from it. Savannah Guthrie had planned to make Harrison Ford squirm. She'd planned to create a viral moment. She'd planned to show everyone how tough she was as a journalist. And she got her viral moment. Just not the way she intended. Instead of looking like a fearless journalist, she looked like someone who forgot that behind every celebrity is a human being who deserves respect. Instead of seeming tough, she seemed cruel. Instead of creating compelling television, she created a cautionary tale. The irony is that if she'd just treated Harrison with basic respect, she probably would have gotten a much better interview. He's known for being thoughtful and articulate when treated well. He's got great stories and interesting insights, but she chose confrontation over conversation. She chose ratings over respect, and she paid the price. Meanwhile, Harrison Ford went on with his day, probably without giving the incident a second thought, because people who know their worth don't need validation from others. They don't need to win every argument. They don't need to have the last word. They just need to maintain their integrity and move forward. That's what makes this moment so powerful. Not the drama, not the confrontation, but the quiet strength of someone who knows exactly who they are and refuses to be diminished by someone who forgot that kindness matters more than clicks. The studio audience went home with a story to tell. The viewers at home had plenty to discuss. And everyone involved learned something valuable that morning. Some learned what to do. Others learned what not to do. But everyone learned something. Hoda and Craig had to figure out how to work alongside someone who'd just revealed a very ugly side of herself. The producers had to deal with the fallout of letting one of their hosts go completely off the rails. And Savannah had to face the reality that her behavior had consequences. But Harrison Ford? He just went on being Harrison Ford. Dignified, professional, unbothered. Because that's what happens when you stand up for yourself without losing yourself in the process. You get to walk away clean. You get to keep your dignity. You get to sleep well at night, knowing you did the right thing. This wasn't a story about a celebrity throwing a tantrum. This was a story about a man who set a boundary and enforced it, who recognized disrespect and refused to accept it, who understood that his time and dignity were more valuable than any television appearance. And in a world where people are constantly told to just smile and take it, to not make waves, to go along to get along, Harrison Ford's simple act of walking away became something revolutionary. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was flashy, but because it was honest, authentic, real. He didn't walk off that set to prove a point. He walked off because staying would have meant compromising his values. And he wasn't willing to do that. Not for ratings, not for publicity, not for anything. That's the lesson here. Not that you should storm off every time something bothers you, but that you should know your worth well enough to recognize when someone is trying to diminish it. And that you should have the courage to protect your dignity, even when it would be easier to just sit there and take it. Savannah Guthrie wanted to create a moment. She wanted to break through the usual celebrity interview fluff and create something memorable. And she succeeded. Just not in the way she'd hoped. She created a moment that will be remembered for all the wrong reasons. A moment that showed what happens when ego overtakes empathy, when ambition overshadows ethics, When the desire to go viral matters more than the desire to do good. Harrison Ford, on the other hand, created a different kind of moment. One that showed what grace looks like, what strength looks like, what self-respect looks like. And that's a moment worth remembering for all the right reasons. The cameras stopped rolling, the lights dimmed, the studio emptied out, but the impact of those 37 seconds will last much longer. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight harder or argue louder. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply know when to walk away. And that morning, Harrison Ford showed millions of people exactly what that